I think you had mentioned like divination, right? Um, because one of the things that he will say in regards to not only the child's cry, but also like the unconscious that speaks, speaks the truth. And so what's interesting about Lacan is, of course, he coins this to Freud, but for Lacan, it's the psychoanalytic um, discovery of the unconscious that brings the categories of truth and knowledge back together, which you only really see them coincide as early as like antiquity. Um, and ancient philosophy, and then there's this split between knowledge and truth that happens with modern philosophy. Hegel kind of somewhat brings it to the forefront, but it's really um Freud's achievement of discovering the unconscious in this Copernican revolution, where knowledge and truth come about from the standpoint of the unconscious that speaks the truth, not because it contains you know something true, but it's the fact that it's true because it speaks, right?
Mm.
Now, what does that have to do with, revelation and divination? Well, it's because for Lacan, this means that rather than a discipline that uses the analogy of seeing and light as a comparison of truth or knowledge, it's rather the oracular tradition, right? Of the Oracle of Delphi that says, know thyself, right? And it's not because we have to look within to know ourselves. Rather, it's the form of the oracle that reveals this truth that is specific for you, right? That has an effect on you. And this is what happens in the speech act when the analyst positions themselves in a way where there is transference and also the analysand is allowed to enter into free association. This oracular knowledge is constituted, and that is constituted from the interruption by the signifier that is the oracular truth that must be heard, right? That could only be heard.
Hmm. Yeah, this is why, like, I've sometimes thought of analytic discourse as an oracular vernacular. It's like it's a mode of speech that is at this intersection of time. There's a temporal dialectic here that the analyst is maintaining through their desire, right? They prevent the stagnation of this dialectic through speech, in which a patient, the analysand rather, can historicize themselves, in a new way, and like rewrite their own history and foretell, what is to come, which is the advent of their own desire. No longer subverted, but brought into something that moves, the motor of analysis itself, which is again the transference being key for that. So I do think there's something to that. I think there's, as a slight side note, there's some interesting correlations there between the mirror stage and the fact that the structure of subjectivity is like divined in a mirror, and that this is well, as Lacan says, the birth of language, or our entrance into the symbolic order. It has this oracular quality even in that way. It's something seen in a mirror. It's like our conception of ourselves, as illusory and narcissistic as that is, also allows us to constitute language in a specific way, which is now inherently oracular. And the oracular function of that can only be realized, through speech in an analytic context, really. It's not so much trying to find the image of the archetype, that is ours, so to speak, that is this introspected thing. Again, that would be the first critique, the issue of the imaginary, right? This is not where Lacan is placing psychoanalysis. So, I mean, just right out of the gate, I think Lacan, it has set the stage in a way that nobody has before.